Hello and welcome to my presentation. Today I will be discussing restorative justice and whether or not it is the solution to the massive problems that we see currently in the U.S. criminal justice system. Quick introduction is the U.S. criminal justice system has been primarily focused on deterrence throughout the last, since around the 1980s with the war on drugs, and the idea is that in order to stop the crime that we see in society, we need to have really strong, tough on crime policies. And this, while effective in the moment, led to a lot of unintended consequences. One of which being that the U.S. currently has 25% of the world's prisoners, while only having 5% of the world's population. And when they are in the prison, it has been noted that they haven't really changed or the prison system hasn't really reformed them or changed them in any meaningful way. This is seen by the fact that there's a remarkably high recidivism rate, which is around 50% of prisoners released from prison will be incarcerated once more. So one possible solution to this that many criminologists have been focusing on in the past 20 years or so has been the use of restorative justice. Restorative justice is the idea that instead of focusing on the harm that or punishing the criminal for what they've done, we should be repairing the harm caused by the criminal act between the victim and the offender, so that they're able to move on with their lives and get a form of closure. There are various different types of restorative justice. It's an umbrella term that encompasses quite a few different things from the peacemaking perspective, such as victim offender mediation, sentencing circles, reparation boards, and victim impact panels. One thing that connects pretty well with restorative justice would be the labeling theory. The labeling theory is the idea that if we start to consider somebody to be a criminal, that they will start to see themselves as a criminal, and then they'd be more likely to hang out with people that are similar or are also exhibit signs of antisocial behavior, and that'll increase their risk of being recidivizing. Yeah, the way this connects is if they are able to restore the harm caused by the criminal act, they are less likely to, or they're more likely to be able to move on from that harm and less likely to have that label be ingrained into their own subconscious. So the research on, or a majority of the research on restorative justice focuses on recidivism, and from what limited resources that we do have, the results have been promising. A UK study or a meta-analysis done in the UK found that on average, it is an incredibly cost-effective solution, being 3.7 to 8.1 times more beneficial in terms of crime prevention, which means the amount that they spend on the restorative justice program leads to a reduced cost of the damages in the long term. And other studies have shown that a modest but important decrease in the amount of recidivism within our previous people. Most of the time, restorative justice practices are focused at juveniles, and overall, the results have been incredibly promising with them as well. It's been shown that restorative justice practices in school leads to better academic outcomes, fewer instances of delinquency, and less contact with law enforcement compared to conventional school discipline. And it also shows that restorative justice programs are good at reducing recidivism as well among juvenile offenders. As for violent versus nonviolent offenders, the data is a tad mixed at the moment, but a couple studies have found that restorative justice practices are more effective for violent offenders, leading to a significant reduction in the amount or their chances of reoffending in a violent way. And for juveniles, typically older age juveniles are where property offenders are significantly less likely to recidivate after being exposed to some restorative justice principles. Another key factor of restorative justice would be the addition of victim satisfaction. Research showed that 90% of victims were satisfied with mediated outcomes. The process made victims feel more involved and helped them feel more healed. Many victims described the process as cathartic and therapeutic and felt less fear of victimization after mediation, but data is still not quite certain whether or not this is a long or immediate phenomenon and whether or not this carries over to the long term. As for race and ethnicity, there has been studies that showed that white juvenile offenders are more likely to receive restorative justice sentences than Black or Latino, and there has not been any, and the data shows that there's no difference in whether or not it's more effective for one race compared to another. So the pros, it's decreased rates of recidivism, increased levels of victim satisfaction, lower levels of expulsions and suspensions, increased academic performance, and it's a cost-effective solution. As for cons, the data can be somewhat mixed in regards to effectiveness sometimes because it's so new. And restorative justice is a very broad range of practices, and it can be hard to know which policies are the most effective and which ones are not. And it can be less punitive than the traditional way, so some people may wonder whether or not they lose out on the deterrence effect of punishment. But to conclude, restorative justice may not be the only solution for mass incarceration, but it is definitely a step in the right direction. It is effective at reducing recidivism and improving victim satisfaction, but it is still relatively new practice in the U.S., and the long-term effectiveness is unknown but promising.